Yes, the one and all Paul friends welcoming you to Starfleet Universe on call. And tonight, well, we've got Barry, we got Gary, we got Dave, and I'm sure we're going to have some lovely people joining us in the Twitch chat room any moment now. There's one that's probably me. I'm sure that'll be very soon. So, in the meantime, while we wait for the chat room to get filled up, Barry, how you doing?
Outstanding. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. To a certain degree. Yeah, I'm a grand knight of my local Knights Council, and one of my fellow knights died, so I have a funeral to go to this weekend.
What's this?
Oh, one of the knights in my council died, so I'm gonna be going to a funeral this weekend. So that was a shocker. One that died, and two that they did it so quickly. He died last Friday, and they're having a funeral this Saturday. Talk about fast! Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and of course we have Gary. How you doing, Gary?
Kind of feel it's difficult to come back from that one, Paul.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I started the podcast on a downer like that, but you know.
Yeah.
As
the song from the '80s would say, "The only way is up."
Yeah.
That is true.
So, I was listening back to parts of last week's recording, the ones where you guys were talking while I was away, and I just wanted to very quickly talk a couple of the things about the stealth field, if it's okay, just to kind of address some of the questions that you guys were bringing up.
Yes.
So, so the rules that are in Captain's Log 50, the man to thank for them is Steve Petrick. As with so many other things in the SFU, he was done because if you have a PDF of the 2011 version of the Omega Master Rulebook and did a Control S and typed in Zosman, you had all of the different things that you would see listed. There's not that many of them.
Yeah, that is true.
And then also there's the stuff that's in CL36 about what Bruce Graw had in mind. But there were no actual rules. So basically Steve Petrick kind of came up with, he wanted to have something that was like a cloak, but that was not the same as any other similar system that already exists in the universe.
Right.
So he came up with the idea of relying on both the tactical intelligence rules and also on passive fire control. Because when the stealth field is active and it hasn't been voided, as long as you're far enough away, I can't remember if it's tactical intelligence level G or H. If you're further away than that from the Zosman ship, then you can't see it at all. I mean, if you have a telescope and look out the window, and you just happen to pick the right spot, then sure, because it doesn't disappear the ship the way a cloak does. It only hides the warp field, the warp flare rather. But you can't detect it on your sensors. But within the range of the tactical intelligence working, both the Zosman ship and the ship dealing with it are under the effects of passive fire control. So you can launch self-guided seeking weapons, but you have to do it twice as far away as normal because of the passive fire control rules. And you've got like a negative penalty for firing heavy direct fire weapons. So it's definitely trickier. Basically, it also means that if you have because in Captain's Log 52, you see the syndicate base that the Zosmans have. That's it looks like a fleet repair dock basically.
Right.
That's what the Zosmans use as their main base away from home. And when that's running the stealth field, that's how close you have to get to the base to find it. So imagine if you've got like a survey ship or a scout and you're trying to cover a massive range of space. You literally have to get within like 12 or 13 hexes of the base to see it. I mean, it can run its stealth field continually and you don't know it's there.
Gary?
So that basically shows, yep.
You mean tactical hexes? They have to be that close? Wow. Damn.
Yeah, because that's why I'm not too sure how you'd actually work the stealth field in a tournament setting, because there's no real accounting for tech intel in that. Right. And also, I don't know. Did they even have passive fire control in the
No, you
tournament or
can.
not?
Yeah, you can use passive fire control.
Yeah.
There's no
Okay,
benefit to you when it comes to ECM and so forth, but you can use passive fire control to
Mhm.
fire at other players.
Yeah, but although in fairness, I mean, you could probably, like, I guess if someone was doing up a tournament ship for the Osmonds, you could start off trying to see if it works without the stealth field, and then if it doesn't, then try to kind of feed in some sort of rule that uh, reflects how the stealth field works
Right.
in some way, and then just kind of like ease it in that way. Because I guess the key thing with the Osmonds would be to try to see do the option mounts work, and does the ship have enough power, and you know, do you need to include things like the shuttle bombs or sort of like how useful is the actual base ship before we start worrying about the stealth field?
Right. Right. Oh,
Right.
agreed.
And the other thing is that sometimes they only allow you to use stuff partially, like what's the name of that race that uses the ion energy? And they
Oh, you
have
mean the Vari?
it's actually
Vudar.
not
Vudar. Thank you.
the Voodar, right? And they have one defensive weapon, and it has two modes of operation. But in tournament, one of the modes is disabled.
Right.
So ion pulse generator.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ion pulse generator, which can only operate in one mode in tournament.
Right. Right. But
So there is a precedent for that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Agreed.
yeah, basically, so Steve Petrick, he was the one who came up with the stealth field rules as you see them, and he also drew up the SSDs. Because the only real clue about the SSDs was that Bruce Gurrell had said that the number of modules a Osmond ship has depends on its size. So Bruce said that the frigate only has one module, and a heavy cruiser has four in it, but not three. So the idea would be that, sure, a heavy cruiser has four modules, but only two of them are weapon modules. The other ones are system modules. So it basically means that you won't go overboard in terms of how many actual weapons the thing has. And either way, if you have a frigate, you basically have to decide from the outset, is this going to be a battle frigate, a weapon frigate, a combat frigate, or is it going to be a support frigate? Because if you want to give that a system module to a frigate, then you're throwing away a portion of it. So you can't have any heavy weapons, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And both options have their place, because you would need support frigates for support, because you may find
Agreed.
it's not that these ships are not in a vacuum. Yeah, they need to serve an economic purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And part of the economic purpose of the
in terms of
part of the economic purpose of the Zosman, unlike the Orions, in my mind, is that they're actually ones who they're supporting their survival and the survival of the empire in general, versus they're just worried about themselves, and their little part of the part of territory, and themselves basically.
Right.
Well, there's a few different things there, because there's the home empire, the Zosman Collective, and that's the home planet plus about 8 or 9 of their original colonies, the ones that survived the cataclysm. They have, I guess, a home defense fleet, and basically it was decided that in CL-52 that they basically default to Miswan type weapons, so wide-angle phasers, tachyon guns, tachyon missiles.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a series of 5 Marauder colonies. Politically, they're independent from the home collective, although I imagine that there's probably some sort of shell game going on, because, I mean, they can't be big enough to support themselves economically. And those are the ones that sponsor the Marauder cells that operate in different parts of Omega. But even then, they're not necessarily on the same page. So in theory, you could have one Marauder cell that's aligned with Marauder Planet A, and they might sign a mercenary contract with, say, the Troburn, and then as well as a separate Marauder cell might be connected to Planet B, and they might be dealing with the Prober. So if the Prober and Troburn go to war, then those two Zosman cells will fight each other. So they might put in the contract that they'll withdraw if disabled, but that's a scenario rule. That's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. So, but it's true that when the time the Andromedans and the soldiers show up, because they're the only ones to really threaten the home colonies directly, then it's all hands on deck. But then the trick is they've got so many ships scattered around Omega. How quickly can you get them back to the home space? Because we haven't really seen the F&E side of how this logistics work. But
right.
If you're running, the syndicate bases don't have positional stabilizers because they're basically like a fleet repair dock, and that means that they can't be used as strategic movement nodes. So it's going to take years for ships to get from one end of the Omega back to their home space, and by that time the Andromedans and Soldier are already launching major attacks. So it could be that there's basically a fair number of Zosmans that are basically stranded away from home for the duration of the invasion, and they only manage to make contact when it's over. So, but yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing too, because you'd basically be like, if we ever get a proper Zosman module, you'd basically have the opportunity to play them as a quote-unquote traditional empire if you're fighting the invaders, or you can play them as a tired faction as well, or you can do both at the same time. So you can, basically mix and match the approach you want to do. So,
right.
Ironically enough, it's kind of like with the Parabians, because you can run the Parabians as a traditional empire, or you can run them as raiders. So there's a bit of kind of inbuilt flexibility there, although they don't have any kind of stealth system to rely on.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for, I think, is it War and Peace for F&E? The Andromeda invasion, basically. I
guess they're just going to call it F&E Gandra War.
Right. Because I think that's going to be interesting in how they do that. To me, that one of the F&E modules that I'm most interested in is how do they resolve the whole issue with the Andromedans, the RTN network, and all of that, and how that's going to work. Both as something a little better than just like a wandering monster. Basically a player controlled fleet. Because obviously an Andromedans, their goal is going to be different than the Galactics. It definitely would be something really interesting in F&E. The strategic sense and how that they plan on doing that.
Right.
Do we want to get started with the Contemplate Torpedo now or no?
On what?
Yeah.
On the Conway Torpedo.
Yes. Actually,
yes.
Even got my module C6 right here. For those who are actually watching the video. What's that,
Okay. So, I was just wondering, Barry, do you have a C6 as well or no?
I'd have to boot up my laptop. I think I have it somewhere. Let me boot up my laptop and start looking for it.
I got the PDF also up on my computer too, because I totally forgot that I actually bought an e-copy too. Because probably one thing I'm going to try to do in the future, which is cut back on the number of physical copies I have of things, and see if I can go mostly electronic, just to save space in the house, But
okay, so before we go any too into it, my line of thinking is this: on the one hand, we know that there are Parabians, historically in Alpha because of Module C6. And so we can get a sense
Okay, I'm
of the
back.
enemies
I
that
was
they would
gone
have fought.
for a minute. When I booted up my laptop, it grabbed my Bluetooth headset.
Okay.
Okay.
I couldn't hear you guys for a minute.
That's fine.
I was just going to say that this week, I think it will be best to focus on how the weapon would work in Alpha. So dealing with the Gorns, the ISC, the Orions, and maybe the Andromedans as well. And then maybe in a future week, if there's enough interest for it, we could look at how the quantum wave torpedo would work in Omega. So if you're dealing with the prober or the trober and that sort of thing. Because it's the same weapon, but the environment would be very different.
All right, page 15.
Agreed. It definitely can be. Do you know if there's modifications to the rules for the Paravians in Omega versus the Paravians that were, obviously part of the Lost Empires, i.e., when they were still, fighting with the Gorns, and then before the Sun Snake destroyed their home world and most of them.
Well, there's about two answers for that. The rules that are in Module C6 are an extrapolation of the early years rules for the quantum wave torpedo that are in Module Y1. So this is basically the rules that we're looking at now. They're what the weapon would have evolved into in Alpha options.
Oh.
And the second point of your question is, technically speaking, the only SSDs for the Omega Paravians that are confirmed to be in existence are the 4 that are in Captain's Log 54 that have the anti-proton weapons installed. And now, I would, like there to be a future update file, which explicitly set out that the rules are the same. So until anyone, there's no point in reinventing the weapon. It's perfectly acceptable for Omega as it is, I would say. Because, look at the Federal Republic. They've got this, have light and heavy photons, but they've got the same regular photons and disruptors and phaser ones that the Federation and Klingons have. And the same ESGs as the Lyra. So they don't, I think the minimum amount of real reinventing would be best. But it's not my decision to make. So hopefully, I'd like a future issue of Captain's Log to look at this, but we'll have to see what ADP say on that.
Oh boy, I'm wondering. Sorry. Okay, it's still doing that. Okay, let me just check over here. Sorry. Just check and make sure I'm still streaming.
All right, so it's basically 2 points of power gives you a quantum torpedo.
Right.
Fire one every turn. Determine the incident.
You can overload for 4.
Distance and.
But the overload power has to be warp energy.
Spread over 3 shields. Okay, so it's so it's basically got main and then it's 2 splash.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, the one thing that they're really explicit about when it comes to the rules is that the splash is not optional.
Right. It's kind of like a PPD. Okay.
Although one thing as well is that if you're attacking a small object like a mine or like a fighter or something like that, actually even if you're ground bases or whatever, they actually take the full damage. Because if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall correctly, a PPD, if you're shooting on a small target, you lose the splash element. Is that correct, or do you gain it as well?
Whoa. Yeah, I think you lose the splash. Yeah, definitely you would lose the splash elements because of, well, for small, objects.
Anything without shields.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. There are no shields to hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So that's one reason why, if you look in the SSD book in Module C6, all of the minesweepers the Parabians have their full quantum wave torpedo loadout, because at the range that you're minesweeping, you're basically guaranteed a kill of any type of mine. So you basically get like a really useful anti-mine weapon you can fire every turn.
True.
Oh, interesting. They have 3 points of ECM, not ECCM. That's an interesting difference. So they're a little harder to phaser down.
Yep. Agree.
Would that be an issue in the tournament or no?
Yes, it would. It would. You would have a +1 to your die roll.
Yeah.
Phasers.
And the interesting part about it is how damage is taken. How what effect damage does, and that is 6 points of 6 points of damage. Will remove the splash elements, and after that, then additional 11 points of damage will then completely reduce the main element to zero. Basically, zero damage will destroy it. Basically, but the
and that
point
becomes 15 if it's overload.
Right. Right. I have to.
Now, my understanding of the rule is that my understanding is that it's a 1-to-1 damage if it's a phaser-like weapon, which I suppose actually just means that Coligar microphasers don't give you any further benefit than they already would.
Right.
But my understanding would be that if you use the warp-tuned lasers from the LMC, you'd still have a 2-to-1 damage because it's one less than the standard that you get from a phaser. But on the other hand, it has a better amount of damage it takes, a worse amount of damage it takes from asteroid and dust damage and so on. So it says here that it takes half again as much damage, 3 points instead of 2, from terrain features.
Yeah. Okay. Miss that part of.
So basically, you have to do 17 points of damage to take it out completely.
Right, and that's a standard torpedo.
What happens if it's at a longer range and still takes? So let's say it was at range 27, and it's only going to do 3 points of damage. You still need to do this full 17 to take it out completely.
It says here, unlike plasma torpedoes, quantum wave torpedoes only have 2 levels of reduced damage. Any damage less than the required level does no damage, but the torpedo will be totally destroyed by 17 points of damage regardless of its warhead strength. So it's almost more like shooting a drone than shooting a plasma weapon.
Damn.
Right.
But then once it hits, it's only 3 points. So
yeah, at that point, it's like don't even bother phasering it.
Which raises an interesting question. If you're an enemy ship and you've got a bunch of quantum wave torpedoes, when, if ever, is the point that you'd use a wild weasel, or rather than just trying to phaser it down, or because you can't tractor it either,
or not phaser it at all.
You just have to try to outrun it. Yeah, basically just take this.
Yeah, well,
I guess.
Well, 7 points of damage is not that much. Even if you're close range, 7 points of damage is like, it's 17 points. It's a lot more. If you think about it, 17 points of phaser damage to take it. So for a plasma torpedo, a 7-point plasma torpedo would only take 14 points of phaser damage. This thing takes 17, so it's a little more resistant to phaser damage. And that's at point blank. As the range goes up, it actually effectively becomes more and more resistant to phasers. because it's just not worth shooting. When you've got a 4-pointer at 22 range, 22 to 26. 17 points of phaser damage. Take out 4 points of torpedoes. Just take the 4 points.
Yeah, but at the same time,
and
but at the same time, there's torpedo only takes 2 points of power to charge. You can launch it every turn.
Right now.
And,
yes.
And a heavy cruiser has 4 of them.
Yeah.
Command cruiser has 5.
So,
the command cruiser has none of the Canadian ships have warp reactors. So if they want to overload their quantum wave torpedoes, they have to use warp engine power.
Yep, I forgot that part of it. Does any source? Okay, so it's only when you overload that it needs warp, right?
Yeah, it's page 18. It's SQ1.411.
Okay.
Let's see. There
Must be provided by warp systems. Yeah. Okay. I see it. I see the rule. Yeah. But standard.
I'm looking through the SSDs now. Their heavy cruiser has
4.
4.
Yep. Which means that if you have a direct fire, if you have a direct fire weapon, like a disruptor,
yeah,
it costs 2 points of power for standard for two. It's going to do around the same amount of damage as a disruptor, at least on the facing shield. Because this is from range 0 to 7 is a 151.
Right, but it has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that you can run it out. You can phaser it, although that's expensive.
Right.
But the advantage is that it doesn't miss, and it can do a lot of damage out at really extended ranges.
Oh yeah, and also the obvious point is that it only costs 2 points of power from any source, and if you want to, you can if you want to have some overloaded, it takes 2 points of warp power. I'll admit that's can be difficult at sometimes to allocate just because of warp is always at a premium, but if you have a couple overloads this goes out to range 14, remember. If you give it between 0 and 7, the overloads are 1-10-1. So that's going to hurt. Which is basically the same amount of damage that an overload disruptor is going to do.
Yeah.
Actually, it's going to do better.
If you have the SSD book open, flick back to the previous page and check out the command cruiser. Because if you add the reactor reset, it comes to 135 VPB. It's the closest thing to the tournament level. Like there's no heavy command cruiser that's between it and the heavy battle cruiser at this time, at this point in time, I should say. So, but this is basically for now at least, this is the next best thing. But if you look at it, I mean, it's got 8 impulse with 2 reactor. So that's a lot of the cost of a standard quantum wave torpedo. And as I say, it's got 5 torpedoes instead of 4. And it still has 10 phasers.
Right. I think this is far better than a disruptor. And now the overload, let's see, by allocating 2 more points of power.
Right, it has to be warp.
The overload must be warp. That's
right.
Okay. Overloads. Oh, and you can overload it on reserve power.
and you can hold the overload for for 2 points of power. But I'm trying to see here, like, is the overload power all has to be warp power, or if maybe 1 point is warp power and 1 point is standard power? But it doesn't actually say that. It just says
No, it's
no. The overload energy must be provided by a warp power system, either.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Or
No, but that's they do the overload initially. But the next rule underneath it says
no.
overload quantum torpedoes can be held for 2 points.
That's for holding.
Yeah, but
But so at the beginning of a scenario, if you're at weapon status 3, you could say that it's overloaded for this, and then you basically
No. It already says it's not a multi-turn arming weapon. It cannot be. You cannot start.
right. But
holding it.
more importantly, did you read FQ1 4.413? That 413 explicitly says a held torpedo can be overloaded by. Okay, that's from allocating. Okay, I'm sorry. It's overloading. Forget me. I thought it was talking about holding an overloaded. Right. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the.
Right. It's 412, which says
Now
can be held for 2 points.
An overload quantum torpedo's warhead does more damage and has maximum range of only 14 hexes. Does that mean if the target is 14 hexes, or does that mean it has 14 hexes of travel?
14 hexes of travel?
Travel, yeah.
Okay. So if you could launch at something further than 14 hexes away, hoping that they'll close.
Right.
I don't know if I'd like to do that.
But it also takes more damage.
Right.
So it takes 21 points of damage to kill an overload. That's huge.
Oh yeah. These are tough to kill.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are. I think this is much nastier than that is probably one of the nastiest heavy weapons of the game.
Yeah, well, especially given that. Oh, I think it's one of the nastier seeking weapons in the game because it's a single turn arming weapon.
Yeah,
it takes only 2 points of energy to arm it. If you don't fire it, 1 point of energy to hold.
Yeah.
So.
And you can overload it if you want to.
Yeah, later on, if you want to, you can overload it. If you overload it, if you don't launch it, you can still hold it for 2 points. Which is
the splash element means that you're very easy to take advantage of a down shield.
Agreed. That definitely was.
Now the other thing is that the weapon doesn't have like if you're using disruptors or disruptor cannons with cannonballs, they have a quote unquote disruptive effect against Andromedan PA panels, and that was introduced to the rules, Captain's Edition, to make it easier for disruptor empires to fight the Andros.
Right.
Now this weapon doesn't have that, but I don't know, does it need it or no?
No. And the splash, big surprise, it works just like the PPD, when it comes to the Andromedans, in that if you're hitting shield number 1, an Andromeda, when you have, front half, rear half kind of thing, that all the damage goes against the front PA panels or rear PA panels, Yeah, actually, the shield number 1 would be front PA panels. And, if it's hitting on shield number 2, it's going to be, there's going to have some wraparound to the rear panels and so forth, just like a PPD.
But just 1 point,
right,
just one
right.
point.
But within Andromedan, in some cases, that can make a big difference, because that means you can't have that rear panel down, because in some cases, having your non-facing panel down is a benefit. Because of, in non-tournament play, The Andromedans have larger batteries, and they can do a panel dump. They have an opportunity.
The other thing to keep in mind is that if this is, this has a very long range 30.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that once it gets out there, it still takes the same amount of damage to kill.
Yep.
That means that, you're, if you're going to get hit from range 27 up, you're not going to bother phasering it. There's no point.
Right. But of course, then you have the whole issue at those longer ranges, at least when it comes to tournament play, I'll admit. And that is, if you have a down shield, that's a very dangerous weapon, even at range 20,
yes,
and the longer ranges.
29.
Yeah.
Range 29.
Yep.
It can still. And the fact that you can fire them every single turn.
Yeah. Yeah. And at range 29, 29, you're not. It still takes you 17 points of damage to kill it, and that's to save you possibly one internal. Because I'm assuming that if it hits you with the splash at range 29, that's half your shields are going to be damaged. So there's a good chance that one of those shields is down.
Now, to be fair, it's only 7 points to kill the splash elements.
Right, that's true. So that's one thing you probably would do. Yeah, you'd spend the energy cost to knock it down by knock down the splash elements.
Yeah.
So here's another Andrew question.
But
if this was a big plasma thing, you could there's no point displacing the launching ship because the torpedoes are self-guiding. But in principle, you could try to displace out of the firing arc or try to displace the warhead itself. But with these, if there's so many of them and they're so small, is that a viable defense anymore or no?
No.
No.
Because if it's a Arabian, there's no point launching them all at once anyway. You might as well feed them in every few impulses and, leave it to the opponent to, see how many pieces of sandpaper they want to try to deal with.
Yeah. The fact that this thing is so speedy, and it's just. The other thing is you can launch 2 of them, wait, and then launch the other 2 and near the end of the turn, and that way, it's I'm going to get close. I can overload the last 2, or I'm not going to get close. Just launch them, because you might as well launch them every single turn.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. It's because unlike drones, they never run out.
You'll never run out, and there's no point in holding them. You might as well fire them every freaking turn.
But and also Orions can take them if it's a heavy war destroyer. They cost 4 PPV for the aft-facing option mounts. But for standard option mounts, they're 0 PPV, so you don't have to pay anything. Mm-hmm. And they'll go in the wing mounts too. So, like an Orion a heavy cruiser can take, I forget how many option points that has. But yeah, basically, you can go all out, and the Orion, of course, if he doubles his engines, then all that extra warp power can be used to overload too. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also remember one thing about these.
Now,
as you pointed out, Barry, sorry. What do you got to change your names? Drives me crazy. But a good point that you made, Barry, which is they can fire every turn. Also, remember, these are self-syncing. They're self-guiding. So you don't have to worry about fire control, having a fire control filled up.
Right. Yeah.
And as also you point out, of course, the quantum torpedoes also have 3 ECM. So there's going to be a +1 shift. It's going to make it even harder to kill.
But the only thing is that well, not having any ECCM be an issue if the ship you're targeting is create, like for example, an Orion ship where it's built in ECM. Would that have an impact in terms of trying to actually hit it with quantum torpedoes?
Yes. Oh, that's a good question. That's an excellent question. Darn, I have to look up I gotta look up the ECM rules. I so rarely use the EW rules that I forget about.
Yeah.
If the seeking weapons when they hit, are they adjusted for ECM? I know obviously against a cloaked ship, yes. You have to do the whole roll thing to see is it full damage versus 3/4 damage versus half damage versus a quarter damage. I'm not sure if the same thing occurs if you just use plain ECM. It's possible. Okay. You had to do that to me. You had to do that to me, didn't you?
Now.
Okay. Try and bring up my. Give me this for a moment. Let's see what.
Oh, another thing about this ship is it's got left warp, right warp, and center warp.
Yeah, the module C6 assumes that the Paradians solved the issue they had in the early years, because in the early years, Paradian ships were like Cobra ships in that they had the risk of having their turn mode deteriorate if they took damage to their port or starboard engines. But in C6, they don't have that problem anymore, so they just maneuver the same as any other non-probe empire.
So the command cruiser has 40 power. That's impressive.
Wow.
Plus 5 batteries, John. Well, that's in the batteries.
Oh yeah, 5 batteries.
20, 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, 40 plus 5. Yeah. Oh, actually, Barry, are you online with your laptop right now?
I am. Yeah. Online with what? I mean, I have access.
Well, yeah, because I don't know if you've seen it yet, but do you want to check out the Shapeways Paravian ships? See what they look like? Because they actually have the Zosman water ships on there too. So if you go to the Shapeways store, you can actually look at the 3D models and maneuver them around. But also on the FedCom forum.
How do I get to? Where's Shapeways? How do I get there? Never been
I guess
on
just do a Google search for Shapeways Amarillo Design Bureau.
Yeah, I usually cheat. I usually go to the BBS and go to the Shapeways, the Project Shapeways. I think.
Okay, and all right. So where do I want to go to? Paravian.
There it is. Yeah, there's 12 of them.
Yeah. So Paravian is there, and then also further down, all of the non-alpha empires are grouped A to Z together. So, for example, Zosman is on the very bottom either way, but it's Zosman Omega rather than Zosman by itself.
Right.
Oh, Zosman Marauders Omega, yeah.
That's interesting. I'm looking at the Pravian raid mothership.
Yeah, that ship has no penalty for move cost or turn mode for no matter how many the pods it takes, and that's the same for the battleship too. So you can load that thing up.
Where is the? Who's this? Down? Oh, there it is. Which one? Which Pravian ship are you looking at?
I'm looking at the Pravian raid mothership is the one I'm looking at, just because I saw that and that looked interesting.
If you want to look, but if you want to have a look, well, the one I was referring to is it's not the command cruiser because that one's not there yet, but the heavy cruiser. You can click either one, either the 3125 scale or the 3788 scale, because the 3D model is basically the same either way.
Oh, yeah, the Pravian. Oh, the raid mothership. Is that what you're looking at?
Well, that's what I looked at, but he's talking about the heavy cruiser.
Oh, the heavy cruiser. Oh, that's interesting looking.
Yeah, especially given the large wings that it has.
Yeah, the style of the design was based on the cover art from Module C6.
Now, how do I? You said you can rotate this.
Yeah. So click on 3D.
If you look at the picture of the 3D.
Oh, I see. I got it.
Yeah, good idea of how it looks overall. Actually, got that. It doesn't have a zoom
like
in.
A bird.
Yep. Well, that's the whole idea. The Pravians were a bird race. I'm trying to use the correct term, race versus empire, when empire is appropriate. Yeah.
I guess that would be species nowadays.
That drives me crazy. Ah, there it is. Okay, I was looking at EW. Yes, a Harley Quinn. It doesn't matter. Agreed that if you're not using the ECM, it doesn't matter. But if you're playing fleet battles in Starfleet battles, I have a hard time believing you not using ECM, EW, because that's just. There's no point for scouts, no point for some of these other ones, and that's where I think, in my mind, electronic warfare really is necessary to use as part of the balance. The reason why you bring scouts along. I understand that people don't like using EW and that rule just because of it makes things more complicated, and Lord knows, one of the big issues, of course, is going to be that means more, and one more thing for energy that requires energy for your ship to run. Because you're going to need to put in energy for ECCM, or ECM, depending upon what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to hit a target or trying to avoid being hit by a target. But, and to your point, Gary, I was looking it up, and yes, that chart, the proximity destination table, is still used. If you don't have, obviously, if you don't have a shift, it starts with a die roll of 1 to 6. 1 to 6, 100%. But if it's 7 to 8, meaning that if you have a +1 shift and you roll a 6, that warhead is now 50% strength. And if you get 2 shift, then which means like 6 points of ECM, which is quite a bit. And you can actually get reduced all the way down to 25% if you roll well. No, actually, no. If you have 2, you have to have a shift of 3 to get down to 25%. Because warhead strength of 25% isn't until your die roll is 9, so it has to be 6 plus 3, which would be 9. So, anyhow, did I lose everybody? Because everyone's gotten awfully quiet. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Bob. Can you hear me?
You made
I can hear
you. You made the mistake of telling me to turn on my computer, and now I'm browsing.
Hey, I didn't. Don't blame me. Don't blame me. That wasn't me. But yeah.
Sorry, Paul. I was just asking. Does that mean that if you're using say, for example, if you shoot at an Orion ship with a quantum wave torpedo, does that mean that unless the ship loans ECCM to the quantum wave torpedo, that it's going to lose the splash element or lose some other element? Like what will the quantum wave torpedo lose if it's impacting an Orion ship with just the -2, with just the +2 ECM?
That's an excellent question because that's one thing I don't think is actually handled.
What's this? What does the ECM do to it?
Yeah, because I'm trying to see where in the rules it says like say if you're shooting an Orion ship,
right.
How much, or like are the splash elements gone, or is it? How do you did you round up or round down basically?
I'm pretty sure you round up. I mean,
so then you still get 1 each.
Dave got distracted. He was reading C7, C6-2. I don't see it mentioned here.
Quantum wave torpedoes use the same rules F3.0 as other seeking weapon pairs.
Okay.
Electronic warfare cannot stop it. If the chart indicates that the shift has allowed only 50% damage and all splash elements are lost.
Oh, okay.
Chart, can reduce its effect when it reaches a target. See table D6.361.
Right.
If the chart indicates the shift has allowed only 25% damage and the main element is reduced by 50%, in addition to all splash elements being lost.
Oh, okay. So if it's 50%, then you lose your at the 50%, you lose your splash elements.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, remind me which rule are you looking at?
Okay. FQ1.316.
316.
On 316. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. So all splash elements are.
Well, that doesn't make that. I think they got 25% and 50% backwards because At 25%, it's doing more reduction than at 50%.
Yeah, but
So
it's
I think FQ 1.3161 should have been 25% damage, and FQ 1.3162 should have been 50% damage.
no, that sounds right, because 3162 says if the chart indicates the shift has allowed only a 25% damage, that the roll chart, then the main element is reduced by
25% 25%
right.
reduced by 75%. Gotcha.
Well, yeah, right. It's reduced. If it's only 25% damage, then the main element is reduced by 50%, and you lose the splash elements.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
which is not bad if you think about it.
Ryan, you have to keep your seeking channels open, because because it says here that the quantum ray torpedo benefits from the ECCM status of the guiding unit. So you, as the Paradian, would have to run the ECCM for your quantum ray torpedoes when you're dealing with the Orions, even if the Orion's not erratic maneuvering, just for the fact that they've got the stealth coating. So even then, tactically, you're doing things differently relative to, say, the ISC or Gorms, or maybe the Andromedans even, because those empires, I mean, sure, the Gorm player could try to run ECM, but it doesn't naturally have it the way the Orions have.
Right, exactly, and the big thing is to get, as I pointed out, to get to that 25% damage roll, you have to have at least a +3 ECM against the torpedo, which you can't do that by yourself. So in the case of an Orion could actually do it by himself with powered and the natural ability of most Orion ships. There's some that don't get the benefit.
Right. Now, of course, tournament play, all that goes out the window.
Right. But we're not talking about the EW stuff. We're not talking about tournament play in that case.
Right. Now there is one major disadvantage of this weapon is that it does not have a bolt option.
Yes, understood. I was actually, that's one thing I was starting to look for, because it's a plasma type weapon. I was wondering if it did have a bolt option, and as you pointed out,
on the other hand, if you're chasing somebody and every now and then you drop another one of these, and now you've basically locked somebody into constantly running away. So your forward firing weapons are facing his rear firing weapons. Now it's just a matter of you can basically hold them for 1 point of power each, and as long as he runs away, just hold them and hold them and hold them, and then it's your phasers versus his phasers.
Yep, exactly. Especially considering
and it does have a decent number of forward firing phasers.
Yep, the heavy cruiser has 6.
Now the other thing too is that so I'm not entirely sure about the way that the weapon mounts with the firing arcs work for Orions, because they're not quite plasma arcs, but they're not quite direct fire arcs either. So if you have, say, an Orion Raider cruiser, and it's got the two side mounts and the forward mount, so do you basically get to decide, are all 3 mounts FA?
No.
Or can you split the arcs of the wing mounts, right? So one wing is FL plus L, and the other is FR plus R.
I have to double check on that, but I feel pretty confident in saying that the wing mounts would be like left side, right side.
But the thing is that the weapon doesn't have it doesn't have hemispheric arcs. It only
Right.
has 120 degree arcs. So
Yeah. So it's FA arcs.
Yeah, I would think then it might be like left front left and right front right. Because that's equivalent to an FA arc.
Yeah. These things look like they have a 60-degree arc.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, with the exception of the heavy war destroyer, no Parabian, or the battleship, I should say as well, most Parabian ships don't have any aft-firing quantum wave torpedoes. So the arcs they have are relatively restricted. If you're dealing with an empire like, say, the IFC, that has more kind of all-around firepower, especially because, like, once you install all those phase 3 refits and stuff, does that become more of a challenge because you're having to press the initiative, and the IFC ship has so much more generated power, and it's got the PPD and everything. So, because I was trying to run the numbers in terms of the point values comparisons, and if you look at the middle years opponents that the Parabians have, they're actually relatively close, like for cruisers, I should say, because it seems the Parabians can keep up when it comes to destroyers. Like the Parabian War Destroyer is a pretty good match against anything the ISC are going to have in that size class. But if you're looking at heavy cruisers, very quickly, once you start adding in things like plasma S refits and stable torpedoes and for the ISC, the PPD and all that kind of stuff, you really start losing the numbers game in terms of BPD. So is that, and also because there's no Sable option for the quantum wave torpedo either. So I guess my concern would be that in an alpha octane setting, do the Parabians start falling behind because they don't have anything else that the weapon does or whatever, except for what we see in the rules, like from the middle years. And also, their ships don't have the expandability because I guess they're designed to land on planets, so they're really at their heart, they're raiding ships rather than line fleet ships. Wouldn't that be more of a problem with them, or does it work out in the end? I mean, like, how durable is the quantum wave torpedo as a weapon? The bigger and better they're going in ISC opponents get.
Well, this is already conjectural because they were originally wiped out, and now you're saying they're not. So I don't think that there was.
There's alternate history where they were not, and
Stuff.
of course, in actuality, they actually were not wiped out. Some of them actually escaped to the Omega Octant. That is true,
Right.
But as you said, Gary, if I recall correctly, that you said that basically they stopped using the quantum wave torpedoes and they switched to using the anti-proton.
Well, I didn't say stop entirely.
Okay.
I would imagine that it's more like for example, if you think about the Hydrons, they don't give up entirely on fusion weapons when they get the Hellbore.
Right.
And so I would, because the thing is that the quantum wave torpedo and the anti-proton weapons, they do two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I would sooner imagine that the Parabians in Omega would basically try to balance both systems and, try to maximize the output from both rather than switching. Because the other thing too is that if you are approaching a Parabian base or a Parabian ship anyway, because of the phaser ones, you have to slow down to tactical speeds at least range 76, because if you get any closer and you're not at tactical speeds, it just takes like a minuscule point of damage to destroy your ship. So they have more warning that you're coming in. But with anti-proton weapons, if you have an anti-proton phaser 1, its maximum range is only 25. And so you're basically 1/3 as much of a keep away distance for anyone who wants to bother you. So it's well, actually that's another thing too, because if you think about it in Omega, even just something as simple as arranging an approach battle varies depending on which phasers the defending empire is using. Because if you're like a Ward or a Unitarian or maybe Corellian with the anti-protons, you can get real close to them. You may not want to, but the engagement is closer.
Right.
But the Federal Republic, because they still keep their alpha oxygen phasers, they get more of a luxury in terms of having that extra minute or two to prepare for you when you get close.
True. Yeah, it's definitely, wow. That's something I've not looked at. I have not looked at the Omega weapons and the whole idea of attacking a base and how that would be done. Because, obviously with Alpha, it's relatively simple. I mean, the idea behind it anyway. With drones, the big thing with fixed installation, you need the mines around it. It's definitely for protecting it from the drones and so forth. But the question is that with the Omega Octet weapons, are there enough longer range weapons that actually can attack a base without getting too close?
Well, or defender, because we don't have most of the phaser 4 rolls for Omega. But yeah. So anyway, I guess just to stick with Alpha for one bit longer. Like some of the bigger Parabian ships, like they have a heavy battle cruiser and a dreadnought and battleship and so on. But again, I was just kind of like curious as to like how, or if at all, they can keep up with their nearest rivals in the Gorno IFC fleets, or if by that stage of the war, are they basically going to be on the back foot and hope that the Romulans can bail them out?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you flip over in the rulebook to page 20, then you can actually see the map as it would have been had the Parabian survived.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's part of the. Is that part of the alternate history? Or is...
Yes, that's one of them, because there's a few different alternate timelines, but two of them create this map that you see on page 20. The third one, they still lose the homeworld, but they become long-distance raiders from the off-map area.
Oh, okay. That'd be an interesting... Wow. An SDS. Dang, I don't remember. I haven't looked at those for years. Stellar domination ships. They were huge ships. The idea is that you had everything. It was a mixture of carrier and PF tender together, along the lines of the Zinni Super SES.
Hey guys.
Yep.
I need to call it a night.
Okay. You're in California, dude.
I know. I have a very early wake up.
Understood. Well.
All right.
Okay.
See you next week.
Okay. Have a good night, Barry.
Maybe. I'll. Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Oh, he disappeared real quick. Yeah. But anyhow, yeah. Why we end it there, because actually it is starting to get a little late, even pour moi. And we can continue this next week.
Yep, hopefully we'll be around for that. But yeah, so I do wonder, what the kind of feedback has been for people trying out these ships, and not just in SFB, because there is a playtest pack for them in Federation Commander. Although the big thing in FC is that because everyone in FC has the Positron fly wheel, it's a lot easier to run away from them.
Yeah. Oh, one thing, Gary, when it comes to the playtest, is that in the Omega module for FedCom? Or is it a different playtest module? Oh no!
It's actually Lost. It's called the Lost Empires Preview Pack. So technically, it's not playtest per se, but it's basically they have like this 3 Praetorian ship cards, 3 Carnival ship cards, and then the rules as they stand for both empires.
Okay, so they're available like in Warehouse 23, or is it only part of the Captain's Logs?
Warehouse 23.
Okay, awesome. I'm sure people will be interested in picking them up. Actually, I'm interested in picking them up. I have to check. Actually, the first thing I have to check is I might have already bought them for all I know. But anyhow, Gary, it's been a pleasure. You have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay. So, had a nice talk about, of course, module. Oops, wrong one. This is the one I wanted to show you, which is the module C6. And nice little discussion about the quantum wave torpedo and some of the wonderful things, reminders of me when it comes to electronic warfare, because Lord knows it's been a while since I played SFU with electronic warfare, though, as I pointed out, if you're playing a fleet battle, you're using EW. I'm sorry, you just are. So anyway, with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.